So off-roading is pretty tough, and we found that out with our Project Tundra recently. If you've been following our project build, you've probably seen the video where we've installed an Icon Stage 10 suspension system in our good old shop truck back there. This was a really cool system and worked wonderfully. We're able to go 2 or 3 times faster in rough off-road conditions than we could with our old single shock system. But we found one thing. In off-roading, everything's great until all of a sudden it isn't. So we were basically bombing down a whoop-de-doo section in our truck, and all of a sudden the height of the whoop-de-doos and the pitch changed, and our truck started bottoming out, and it pitched us out of control, and we went into like some rocks and bent some of our wheels and some of our suspension components. So guess what? We're upgrading even more. Now this is going to be a pretty good bolt-on system. Now of course for really hardcore off-roading there's like cooler things you can do, like cut out your bed and then put a bed cage in and put some really cool bypass shocks, put a front engine compartment cage and cut away your fender wells and put like super awesome stuff in there. But that's beyond the scope of our truck. I mean, our truck is all around shop truck, off-road fun, camping, race car tow vehicle, and shoot, it even carves canyons pretty good. So this would kind of make it so off-road biased that it would lose a lot of its utility, and we don't want to do that. So this is probably the scope of some of the coolest stuff that you can just bolt on without much fabrication. First off is our coilovers. Now we had Icon 2.5 coilovers in the truck originally, and they're single adjustable, really cool. I mean, they work amazing, but we're trying to like do some pretty crazy stuff. So unfortunately, it wasn't amazing enough. So we're going up to Icon's 3.0 shock. Now just looking in the video, you could probably see how this is like a pretty massive, huge shock. Now size isn't everything, so let me explain to you what makes this a lot better. The 3.0 uses Icon's twin piston technology. You have the main piston that controls a lot of your compression and rebound damping, and you have an extension off of that with another piston. The other piston goes into a separate tube inside the shock body that acts like a hydraulic bump stop. Now, we have hydraulic bump stops in the rear of our truck. What they do is they provide an extra layer of cush and prevent the suspension from bottoming out harshly. With the twin piston, when you get past about a little bit past halfway through your travel, you get the first stage of your hydraulic bump stop. So the secondary piston goes into this tube inside here. The first stage starts to decelerate the shock as it compresses, and starts to give a progressiveness to the bottoming out. Now as you get into the last 1.5 inches or so, you get into the second stage, which is almost like a really hard hydraulic bump stop. So this will really slow down your suspension from bottoming, and it won't bottom harshly. It'll just kind of go cush. It won't like go kabam. So you got your 2-stage hydraulic bump stop internally inside the main body of the shock. You get the 3-inch body, so you have like a massive 3-inch body with a huge main piston. So that's about 100% more piston area than the 2.5-inch. So with the big piston, you get more shaft engagement, so everything is stronger. You get more shaft piston bearing area, so you have less play and you get less stictions for better action, and you have more room for like a bigger valve stack. So a bigger valve stack gives you more damping sensitivity. So the shock is more sensitive to small movement. So with the big piston, big body, you're also moving more fluid through your valves for every little movement. So more fluid flow, bigger valves means more sensitivity to damping. Bigger body, more fluid. You also have more resistance to fading and heat. Since you're displacing more fluid, as you see, the remote reservoir has to get bigger between the two shocks to make room for that fluid displacement. This also dissipates heat better. And just like the 2-inch shock, you have Icon's CDC valve, which is low-speed compression damping. The low-speed damping is what controls your body roll and your nosedive and everything. So you can kind of turn this up and this thing will handle really good on the street. So if you're going canyon carving, you can increase your low-speed compression and this thing will handle like a sports car. Some other cool features that Icon has in both shocks is spherical bearings in the ends and this upper spring mount that is kind of like super low profile so you can fit the longest possible shock. I guess the other thing that's cool about the 3.0 is it has almost an inch more travel than the 2.5 and it's a little bit more travel, got a little bit more room to soak up some big bumps. So like due to the motion ratio of the suspension, that inch translates to about a little bit more than 1.5 inches on the vehicles. So that's a significant increase in travel. So we got something that's super bottom resistant with a progressive bottoming out, more travel, more fade resistance, and I think we're not going to slam through the travel and go out of control as easy next time. So the Tundra is a pretty heavy truck, and one part that we found that is surprisingly underbuilt is the knuckle. Now, we suspect that the knuckle is somewhat tweaked somewhere in here. Now, we haven't measured it, but we think this is actually what bent. This is from experiences that some of our buddies that off-road Tundras have run into. Now, I have a couple of buddies, they've actually broken their knuckle right here. Now, when you consider that the Tundra is a huge truck, I mean, this thing right here is pretty underbuilt. I mean, it's almost like something you would find in a Honda, for instance, that's almost about the same size. It also has some stress risers and stuff from the manufacturing process, and these are areas where cracks can start. So we suspect that this is bent somewhere. It's kind of amazing that Toyota made everything super big and strong in the truck and then made this wimpy knuckle. There's two weak points right here and in this bend that I was just talking about, and also where the tie rod goes on. Now, considering the size of the truck and the size of the wheels and tires, this is pretty spindly. And you look at the overall construction where the bearings held, I mean, this could like just twist, bend, and tweak. So perhaps one of the most important things to beef up for off-roading is this. And we came up with the part that I think is one of the ultimate solutions. This is a Camberg knuckle. Now, as you can see, this thing is massively beefed up. And the part of the knuckle that's traditionally weak in the Tundra, I mean, you could see how much bigger, thicker, and beefier, and how much more section area you have. Also, the other area where it's weak, where the tie rod goes to, is also massively beefed up. And you also have a lot more support around the hub and wheel bearing. I mean, this guy's not going anywhere. This is manufactured out of 4130 chrome moly plate. It's TIG welded which must be a really buff TIG welder. And it's hollow section, So even though it's pretty heavy, it's not as heavy as it maybe could have been because it's hollow on the inside. It's hollow, but it has interior gussets that are welded through the exterior. I mean, this thing is not going anywhere. If you manage to bend this, your truck's probably destroyed. But you got the peace of mind knowing that some kind of casual trail running isn't gonna like strand you. Now I have a couple of friends, when their knuckles broke, it broke like maybe 20 miles in off-road. There's no way a tow truck's getting to you. So what they had to do is get a new knuckle, get another buddy with a truck, drive to where they were stranded with tools, and fix it on the side of the trail with like no air tools or no lift or anything. Now that seriously sucks. I mean, that could take maybe a week out of your life, and maybe that would be all of your vacation spent fixing your truck in the dirt in the middle of nowhere. So you don't want that to happen. I think that's why this Camberg knuckle is a good investment. Maybe one of the best you can have if you're going to do some more serious off-road. Finally, another part that's known in the Tundra off-road community to fail is the tie rod end. Now, if you're used to cars, you think this is pretty beefy, but I guess for a truck, it really isn't. So a lot of the guys are running bigger wheels, bigger tires. They're going off-road and pounding hard, and then the tie rod end bends like in this area. It's kind of a semi-common Tundra off-road problem. We suspect that this might have slightly bent someplace too. I mean, we're not going to bother to measure it to find out exactly if it did or not, but we're going to make sure our truck never has this problem. So we're replacing the tie rod end with this Coach Builders piece that's heavy duty. When you look at it, I mean, it's a lot beefier. The material's upgraded too. So this is machined from 4130 chromoly billet, and it uses a huge 1-inch spherical bearing. I mean, this sucker's not going anywhere. So it's a huge 1-inch spherical bearing. I mean, this is the size of a bearing that we use on ball joints for a race car, for instance. But for a truck, it's the tie rod. One of the things that Coach Builders did is they figured out the spacing between this and the knuckle, and they determined that if they brought this a little closer to the knuckle, it would eliminate some of the bump steer that the Tundra has when it's raised up a little. You can kind of see that difference here. It's about maybe a 1/4 inch difference. And supposedly we haven't plotted the bump steer on the truck because, well, it's a truck. But this is supposed to reduce the bump steer. There's also some threads where you can actually get washers and actually mess with the bump steer curve yourself. You can put washers on this side to kind of move the location of this. So if you wanted to do some of your own bump steer experimentation, there's plenty of leeway for you to do it. The spherical bearing or heim joint is covered with this rubber dust boot that keeps dirt and water out of there. I mean, pretty simple. You can't say too much about these, but I mean, judging by the size of everything, this thing's never going to break, and it's always good to get rid of bump steer when you can. So the next part in Project Tundra isn't about improving the brute strength that much. As you can see, the stock Tundra lower control arm is a pretty substantial piece. I mean, this is one part of the front suspension that's not underbuilt. This thing could take a beating, but it has squishy rubber bushings, a conventional ball joint with limited articulation, and to put our bypass shock, we MIG welded on a bracket, which is all right and it does the job. It's just not MotoIQ level of Super Sano. So, since we're going through everything else, we decided that we can use something trickier too. What we did get is a Dirt King lower control arm. Now the Dirt King lower control arm has a lot of cool extra features. It has Delrin bushings, which gets rid of the rubber. So just like a race car, now everything in our truck suspension is all hard bushings or spherical. So that gets rid of a lot of the flex and the play. So we have more precise steering control, and we have more control of the tire's contact patch and more control of the alignment. Another cool thing is instead of a ball joint, we use this gigantic spherical bearing, and this is a high angularity spherical bearing, and this angle is right. So with the right high misalignment spacers, we have a whole lot of articulation. With the ball joint, we're like right at the limit of what the ball joint can do, and if we just went even the slightest bit higher, we're risking damaging the ball joint. And you know, that holds your whole front suspension together, and you do not want to damage the race that holds the ball. With this spherical, it articulates around and it can accommodate any angularity that our suspension is going to encounter. We also have really nice mounts for the main coilover, our bypass shock, and the anti-sway bar. Now a lot of off-road guys, they take the front anti-sway bar off, but my personal opinion, unless you're rock crawling, you want to keep it. You know, you're not going to be going rock crawling with a big old Tundra unless you're really hardcore, and you're not going to get into super narrow technical trail work. Where a bigger truck like the Tundra does well is kind of open, more deserty terrain, fast, high-speed stuff, just because of its size. And in that kind of driving, you want to run a sway bar. And when you think about it, all the off-road desert trucks, they all run sway bars, and all the short course trucks that race, they all have sway bars too. So, my opinion, keep the sway bar, and if you want to do that, the Dirt King mount can accommodate it. The Dirt King arm is constructed like the Camberg knuckle. It's a hollow chromoly construction with internal gusseting, so it's really not that heavy. Weighs about the same as the stock arm, but it's a lot stronger because you have internal gussets that are all secured. You also have this mount if you wanted to run limiter straps. Now our Icon shocks have hydraulic top-out bumpers built into the shocks, so you don't really need the limiter strap. This can handle all the articulation. That's another reason why you don't need a limiter strap. And shoot, what else? You don't see them here, but they're drilled and tapped for Zerk fittings. That way you can grease your bushings periodically, keep them nice and smooth and from wearing out. Or if you go through a lot of mud or a lot of water, you can purge it all out by sticking fresh grease in. If you wanted to do a bunch of fabrication and run external hydraulic bump stops, they have the pads on either side where the hydraulic bump stop can contact without damaging the arm. And they're nicely finished in a tough powder coat paint, and they're pretty cool. I mean, they're kind of like more like race car parts almost than truck parts. So, you know, it's not like a whole ton load stronger, but the stock Tundra arm is really strong. But it's going to get us more performance and cleans up some of the stuff we didn't particularly like underneath the truck. So the final bit of stuff that we're going to be putting on our Tundra is this. It's a differential lowering kit. Now the Tundra has pretty bad front axle angularity, even stock. So what we're talking about is the amount of tilt that the axles have. So axles are tilted, your CV joints are articulated pretty much to the maximum all the time. Our stage 10 Icon suspension didn't really raise the truck very much, maybe maybe less than an inch. So we felt that it was still okay and still within the limits of the stock axle. So now that our truck is raised about another inch, we're going to get into the zone where our axle angularity is going to start getting too extreme. It's going to cause the boots to tear, and it's also going to prematurely wear the CV joints. You can kind of tell when this is happening when you see that the pleats of the CV are touching at ride height. When they're touching, they're rubbing and creating a lot of friction and heat. So that means your boots aren't going to last too much longer. Since the Tundra's angle is so bad, even at stock ride height, we got to do something. That something is a low off-road differential lowering kit. Now that's a lot of words for something that's really simple. It's actually just two spacers that drops the front of the differential about an inch with longer bolts, and some bolts and spacers to drop the skid plate by a corresponding amount too. Now, 1 inch lower is going to translate in a lot better axle angularity, a lot longer CV life, and you're not going to tear your boots. So with our suspension fully fortified, this doesn't mean that we can go bombing full speed. We don't actually plan on going any faster, but it's more for peace of mind, knowing that we have some reserve. You know, like we're at the range where off-roading could start getting expensive. You have suspension that's capable of going through hoop-de-doos at like 60 or 70 miles an hour, unless something goes wrong. I mean, it's not like a Class 7 race truck. And now that everything is so heavy-duty, the only things left to break are expensive things like your cross member, your steering rack, your frame even. So it's not a ticket to go berserk, but it's just assurance. And if you use common sense and use your head, you're not going to get stranded in the middle of nowhere. If you like this video and you want to see more content from us, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to MotoIQ.com for a detailed article about all the goodies that we're putting on the truck. And if you want work done on your truck, go to MotoIQ.com, hit the garage services link, fill out the form, and we'll get you a quote. Till next time, there's next time.